Andrew Marsay, Associate Director of Transport Policy and Economics at Arup, joins me now at the desk live. Thanks so much for joining us, Andrew, this afternoon. Well, of course, we've got the FIFA Soccer World Cup really taking centre stage in South Africa, but with that comes the costs associated with having to host this event itself. I mean, the government bill for upgrading infrastructure related to the World Cup has been put at 40 billion rand. In your view, has this been money well spent?
One word answer, yes. The question is that to be answered is, has it all been for the World Cup, and is it all going to be redundant after the World Cup? And the answer to that is no. Most of the transport infrastructure upgrade has got a much longer time frame than that. And just for example, the public transport upgrades that are taking place, the bus rapid transport, 2010 was taken as a first deadline, but a second deadline of 2015 and a third deadline of 2020 are also in place as part of the Department of Transport's Public Transport Action Plan. So what we're seeing is really, although it's a lot of money, it's the first stage of a much longer term public transport investment plan.
Well, let's try to quantify this a bit, because what difference do you see this extra investment making in terms of propelling future economic growth for the country, many praying that it will spell a faster economy?
Well, let's take Gauteng as an example. Gauteng is the engine room of the South African economy. If we have congestion in Gauteng, if people can't get to the job opportunities, if employers cannot get workers into their workplaces, then the economy will be slowed down. So the Gautrain, the bus rapid transports, and also the motorway expansion will contribute to economic growth in Gauteng by making more places more accessible to more people for a longer period of time. The immediate impact of the transport is hard to quantify, but when you look at how the economy will be freed up to, if you like, express its growth with less congestion, and then measure that backwards over, say, a 20 or a 30-year period, I believe that the investment will far more than pay for itself.
Well, in terms of quantification, of course, only time will tell. That having been said, though, I mean, there have been suggestions out there that money could have been better utilized elsewhere, where we've got major social and developmental issues to actually contend with, issues like health, issues like housing. I mean, is there merit in that argument?
Well, there is merit, because when people are really on the bottom rung of society, they need direct help, and investment in health, education, housing are vital. But in the end of the day, government cannot sustainably provide health, education and housing services simply as a public provision. One's got to get to the position where people are able to sustain their own provision through their own incomes. And so there's a trade-off between what we call economic infrastructure, such as transport, electricity and telecommunications, and social infrastructure, such as housing, education and health. Now, if you overinvest in the social infrastructure, you can actually make it more difficult to create the sustainable ability to access these services in the long run. And so transport investment is a good investment, ultimately also from a social perspective. So
ultimately the stepping stone to getting there eventually. I mean, if we do a bit of a transport audit right now, I mean, how much of a deficit do we still have? Because certainly the World Cup deadline has acted as a strong enough motivator for meeting targets, but there's still quite a lot more that needs to be done.
Well, there is, and I did mention with regard to the public transport investment that the government's action plan has a three-time horizon. 2010, 2015 and 2020. And it's not only linked to provision of BRTs, it's also linked to adapting the taxi industry to integrate better with modern public transport. There are deficits in road investment, there are deficits in our commuter rail investment, and these do need to be addressed. And I think government, because of the link between transport investment and economic growth, there's a very strong case for government even borrowing more money within reason, within financial probity reasons, but to invest now to secure future benefits.
We talk about these targets that have been set, to meeting future deadlines. Yes. Of course, the World Cup has, as I mentioned earlier, acted as a strong motivator to meeting those targets. Now with the World Cup here and soon to be gone as well, how confident are you in as steady progress being made in actually hitting those deadlines moving forward?
Well, 2010 has been a catalyst up to now, but what's going to be the catalyst from now on is going to be customer aspirations. If you've ever been on the Gautrain, you'll see how thrilled people are to see that you can get to the airport in 15 minutes now. People's perceptions of what is possible with public transport is now going to drive demand for improvements. People will not accept poor quality commuter rail services now that they've tasted the Gautrain. People will not accept poor quality taxi services when they've experienced the rapid transit of a BRT. The customer is going to drive things in future.
Well, obviously big question marks around how government is actually going to foot this bill moving forward. We've got the opening up of tolls on the highways, one revenue earner that's being established for the way forward. Can government, though, do it alone, or do we need to see some kind of change in the model that's been adopted so far?
I think we do need to see change. Government is if you like, the funder of last resort, but government cannot fund it all. In fact, it's not necessarily the best funder of transport operations. And already you'll find the freight operating company, Transnet, and PRASA, the passenger rail operating company, are well aware that partnerships with private sector operators may be the best way to get good value for money and to deliver better services at less cost even.
Well, on that note, Andrew, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for your time this afternoon.